Good morning, y'all. I want to bring y'all a genuinely interesting shift in the tropics this morning, because after weeks of me telling y'all about weak, flattened out waves getting shredded almost the moment they left the African coast, something has changed. The waves coming off Africa right now are bigger, more robust, and carrying more organized convection than anything we have seen so far this season, and forecasters are already calling the system expected to emerge in the coming days potentially the best chance of the entire year for a real tropical storm or hurricane. Let me walk y'all through exactly what has changed, why it is changing right now, and what I want y'all watching for as we move through the final stretch of August into September. Let's start with where this story has come from, because I think the contrast genuinely matters. Earlier this month, meteorologist Ryan Maoué was describing the Atlantic basin in blunt terms, noting that huge plumes of Saharan desert dust were continuing to squelch and suppress tropical convection, and that the basin remained essentially dead. He explained that strong tropical waves at lower latitudes were moving off the African coast with a circulation, only to quickly flatten out within 24 to 48 hours as they continued westward. Waves were emerging off Africa, robust enough that they would have likely been classified as tropical storms almost immediately upon touching water, if only they had emerged at a lower, more favorable latitude. But instead they kept emerging too far north, running straight into cool water left behind by the Canary Current, and going, in his words, poof. Now compare that to what forecasters are saying this week. As of Friday, August 21st, Maoué's own updated assessment describes a tropical wave expected to exit Africa in 4 to 5 days. And he specifically states that this could represent the best chance yet, or maybe of all, of 2026 at a tropical storm or hurricane heading into the end of August and early September. I want y'all to sit with that language, because best chance of the entire year is a genuinely strong statement from a forecaster who has spent this entire season describing a mostly suppressed, disappointing Atlantic. The AIFS ensemble model specifically picks up a tropical wave in the main development region at days 4 and 5, carrying a moderate 40% signal for development into a tropical storm or hurricane once it gains latitude, still 8 to 9 days out from today. Let me explain why this shift is happening now, because it connects directly to the seasonal rhythm I have described to y'all many times this summer. Tropical activity in the main development region, the stretch of ocean between Africa and the Caribbean, typically begins increasing during August before reaching its full seasonal peak in September. This is the exact transition period, sometimes called Cabo Verde season, when the tropical waves emerging off Africa's coast tend to become more numerous and more robust, simply because the surrounding atmospheric environment, warmer water, decreasing Saharan dust, increasing instability, becomes more broadly supportive of organized convection. What we are watching right now is that seasonal shift finally arriving, later than an average year given how suppressed this season has run so far, but arriving nonetheless. I want to explain the specific obstacle any new wave still has to overcome, because forecasters have not simply declared this year's suppression over. According to Maoué's own analysis, the main development region remains hostile due to dry air, meaning the Saharan air layer and its associated dust, but the water underneath that dry air is warm. Which means the convection and circulation associated with a new wave may survive long enough to reach the warmer waters of the western Atlantic, even if it struggles through the driest stretch of its journey. That is a genuinely different framing than what we were hearing earlier this month, when waves were described as flattening out entirely rather than merely struggling through a difficult stretch before potentially recovering further along their path. Let me bring in a specific, real example from earlier this month that illustrates exactly what a wave-finding genuinely favorable conditions can do, because it previews what forecasters are now hoping this new wave might replicate. Back in early August, the National Hurricane Center was tracking a disturbance designated Invest 93C, though its origin traced back to the same Atlantic main development region wave pattern I have been describing. That system was embedded in a very moist atmosphere, with mid-level relative humidity close to 80%, traversing surface water close to 30 degrees Celsius, roughly 86 degrees Fahrenheit, about 1 degree above average for that time of year, with wind shear running light to moderate. Given those genuinely favorable conditions, the Hurricane Center assigned that disturbance a 50% chance of becoming at least a tropical depression within days, and a 90% chance within about a week. I bring this up because it shows you all exactly what this basin is capable of producing once a wave actually finds the right combination of moisture, warm water, and low shear. The same combination forecasters are now hoping this new wave exiting Africa in 4 to 5 days might also find. I also want to give you all the AccuWeather perspective on this same shift, because independent forecasting teams have been describing a genuinely similar trend. AccuWeather meteorologists have noted that tropical activity in the main development region typically begins to increase during August before reaching its seasonal peak in September, and that any given wave still has to overcome several obstacles as it moves westward. Their team has specifically been monitoring multiple areas of interest simultaneously, watching whether individual waves can maintain their organization while moving westward, and whether they can remain north of the strongest wind shear near the Caribbean, since that specific stretch of ocean remains the graveyard where so many of this season's earlier systems went to die. Let me walk y'all through why size and organization actually matter so much when we talk about a wave getting bigger, because I want to make sure this concept is genuinely clear rather than just a vague, dramatic phrase. A tropical wave's convective footprint, meaning the physical area covered by organized shower and thunderstorm activity associated with it, reflects how much moisture and instability that wave has actually managed to consolidate. A small, disorganized wave might show scattered showers spread thinly across a wide stretch of ocean, with no real concentration anywhere. A larger, more robust wave shows that same moisture beginning to consolidate into a smaller, more concentrated area. Exactly the kind of structural evolution that precedes the formation of a closed surface circulation. When forecasters describe waves as getting bigger and more organized, they are describing exactly this consolidation process beginning to happen more successfully than it has for most of the season so far. I want to bring in the broader seasonal outlook context here too, because I think it helps calibrate expectations even amid this genuinely exciting shift. NOAA's most recent update to the 2026 Atlantic hurricane outlook continued trending toward lower numbers, dropping the total expected named storms and major hurricanes by one storm each compared to earlier forecasts, doubling down on a quieter than average season. The agency's own analog year comparisons, using historical seasons with comparable El Niño conditions, specifically referenced 1997, 2006, 2009, 2015, and 2023, 4 of which produced below normal Atlantic activity, with some registering among the least active seasons on record. I want y'all to notice something important buried in that same analog comparison, though, because it cuts both ways. The 2015 season, one of 3 consecutive below normal years cited in that comparison, still produced Tropical Storm Bill, a system significant enough to directly affect the Houston region. A below normal season, even a genuinely suppressed one, has never meant 0 impactful storms. And this week's shift toward more robust wave activity is exactly the kind of development that can produce a real, if isolated, storm, even within an otherwise quiet year. Let me also update y'all on the wider tropical picture, because there is genuinely a lot happening simultaneously across multiple ocean basins right now, and I think the contrast helps illustrate just how much more active the Pacific has been compared to the Atlantic this entire season. Typhoon Saudal in the western Pacific appears to be rapidly intensifying and is expected to reach super typhoon status by Sunday. Hurricane Lala remains active out in the open central Pacific, continuing its own life cycle well away from land after making that historic landfall on Hawaii's Big Island earlier this month. Tropical Storm Moke is following behind Lala, but remains poorly organized heading into Saturday, with the threat to the Hawaiian Islands currently assessed as low and indirect. I want y'all to hold this global picture in mind because it reinforces something I have told y'all all season. This year's strengthening El Niño has been simultaneously suppressing the Atlantic while significantly boosting activity across the Pacific. And this week's shift toward more robust Atlantic waves does not change that broader season-long pattern. It simply represents the Atlantic finally catching up to some of the seasonal favorability the Pacific has enjoyed for months. I want to walk y'all through exactly what I want y'all watching for as this new wave continues its journey over the coming days. Right now, it has not even left the African coast yet, sitting 4 to 5 days out according to this morning's guidance. Once it does emerge, the first thing forecasters will be watching for is whether it maintains organized convection through its initial crossing of the driest, dustiest stretch of the eastern Atlantic, the exact stretch that has killed off so many promising-looking waves earlier this season. If it survives that crossing with its structure intact, the next question becomes whether it can hold together long enough to reach the warmer, more consistently favorable waters of the western Atlantic, still 8 to 9 days out according to the current model signal, before encountering whatever sheer or dry air might be waiting for it closer to the Caribbean. Let me also explain why forecasters are being appropriately cautious with that 40% figure, even while calling this system potentially the best chance of the year. A moderate 40% signal this many days out reflects genuine uncertainty, not confident prediction. Long-range ensemble models like the AIFS excel at identifying broad, favorable patterns worth watching this far in advance, but they carry real limitations in predicting the exact fine-scale evolution of a specific wave's structure over a period spanning more than a week. That is exactly why Maui's own language describes this as the best chance yet, rather than a guaranteed, confirmed development, and it is exactly why I want y'all treating this as a genuinely promising signal worth watching closely, not a confirmed storm you should already be building specific plans around. I also want to remind y'all why this stretch of the calendar, the final days of August sliding into September, carries such outsized importance for the entire rest of the season. This is historically the most active window of the entire Atlantic hurricane season, and it is exactly the stretch when the classic long-track Cabo Verde storms, the ones capable of becoming the season's most significant hurricanes, have historically originated. A season that has run quiet through most of June, July, and the first half of August can still produce a genuinely dangerous storm or two if this exact window, right now, finally delivers the kind of wave activity forecasters have been waiting for all summer. So let me bring this together and tell y'all what I want different groups of y'all watching for over the coming days. If you live anywhere across the Lesser Antilles, the broader Caribbean, or the Gulf and Atlantic coastlines of the United States, I want you checking the tropical weather outlook daily, starting now, not waiting until this wave actually emerges off Africa in 4 to 5 days. Use this window, while the system is still just a signal on a long-range model, to confirm your hurricane preparedness kit, your family communication plan, and your evacuation route are all current. Exactly the kind of groundwork that matters most before a system's odds start climbing rather than after. And regardless of where you live, understand that this week's shift toward bigger, more organized tropical waves represents a genuine change in this season's character, arriving right on schedule for the seasonal calendar, even if later than an average year, and exactly the kind of development that deserves renewed, active attention after a summer that has, for the most part, allowed y'all to relax. I will be tracking this system closely as it continues toward the African coast, assuming it emerges as expected through its entire crossing of the Atlantic over the following week to 10 days. I will have updates out for y'all as its odds continue evolving, whether that means this wave living up to forecasters' hopes and becoming a genuine tropical storm or hurricane, or falling victim to the same dry air and shear that has claimed so many of the season's earlier systems. If this breakdown helped you understand exactly why forecasters are suddenly talking about tropical waves getting bigger after a summer of describing a mostly dead Atlantic, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because I want to make sure y'all get every update as this potentially significant system continues developing. Share this video with anybody you know across the Caribbean or the Gulf and Atlantic coastlines, because a shift this genuinely significant, arriving right at the doorstep of the season's most historically active stretch, deserves everybody's renewed attention. I will keep watching the tropics for y'all, and I will see y'all in the next one. Stay weather aware, and I love y'all.